Welcome to the Chinese Medicine Podcast with your host, Marie Hopkinson, Chinese medicine practitioner. Hi, welcome to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. I'm Marie Hopkinson. I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner, and today I'm joined by another Chinese medicine practitioner, Adam Heysom-McDowell, and he is going to be talking to us about a myriad of things in Chinese medicine, and especially he's got a really interesting, a keen interest, you would say, or he's an expert in making teas and balms and the external applications of Chinese medicine. So today we're going to be talking about like how to use different aspects of Chinese medicine that you might not have come across, or you may have come across in, Chinatown stores and things like that, and you might think, what's that, or how does that work, and are these things safe, and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So welcome, Adam.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, I wanted to be able to share what I've learned over the years, different ways of using herbal medicine. Because we all think of Chinese herbal medicine as something that you take internally, and often it's either cooking up the raw herbs, which if anyone's had those, they can be quite smelly and they never taste particularly good. Or you might have the powdered version. They're often prescribed in granules, or sometimes the little black balls. They're the patent type herbs. But Chinese medicine extends way beyond that, and even through the classics that we learn when we're studying Chinese medicine, they talk about poultices and balms, and ways that you can apply herbal medicine that's not internal.
Yeah, right. Okay, so herbs could be used on the skin or like externally, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably one of the most simple ways of using herbs externally is just to make a tea. There's a great formula that includes chrysanthemum flowers. It's very cooling, and it's also very good for the eyes. And you can, if you've got dry eyes or a little bit of irritation, you just make a nice chrysanthemum tea, let it cool down, and then put it onto a cotton ball or a nice flannel, and then just put it on the eyes, and it's so soothing. Yes, it's so soothing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've told patients to use that for things like conjunctivitis, or if they've got inflammation in their eyes, or they've got sometimes with something like conjunctivitis, I think you don't know whether you have it or not. You just wake up with the inflammation aspect of it, like your eyes might be red and itchy, and you're unsure what you should do at that moment. You might have called your doctor and you're waiting for an appointment. These are really great things you could do.
Absolutely.
While you're waiting for that appointment, yeah?
Yes, I mean, the research coming out these days is showing the actual components, the active components of these herbs. And so chrysanthemum and honeysuckle flower, which we call Jiang in Chinese medicine, are antibacterial, and they have anti-inflammatory properties. So they're great for using on those types of things.
Yeah. And the chrysanthemums, like Jiang or honeysuckle's also pretty easily available, but chrysanthemum's very easily available. Like if you go down to your local Chinatown stores, so look, people watch this from the UK, US, India, all those kinds of places. So I would almost like to guarantee, but I can't guarantee, but because Chinese love chrysanthemum, they just it's just a really popular drink, isn't it?
Absolutely. If you go to your local Chinese restaurant, you can always ask for Juhua, which is the name of chrysanthemum. Have it as a tea, and it's so good for after a meal because it helps. We say it moves the qi, so it helps with that full feeling you get after a delicious meal. So it's great to have both internally and externally.
Okay. Yeah, cool. So chrysanthemum tea and chrysanthemum for the eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. And what's good about chrysanthemum is it does taste good, right?
It does.
It's one of the few Chinese herbs that doesn't taste like yucky. So we can all enjoy a cup of chrysanthemum tea. Yeah. So how did you get into making teas in your clinic? Because that's something that you started doing after you started practicing. You started making herbal teas, right?
So like with all Chinese medicine practitioners, we all learn the roots of herbal medicine, and it all starts off with decocting the herbs, and that's a long process. You've got to boil the herbs for a certain amount of time, and then you have to strain them. Often we'll boil them twice, and of course they don't taste that great. But I still wanted my patients to be able to experience herbal medicine and have some effect. So look, taking it as a tea that you decoct for 3 to 5 minutes is not going to be as strong as a traditionally decocted tea, but it's still going to have an effect. And so I started experimenting with some combination of herbs for people, and I thought, well, let's try and make this easier for people. And it's a good introduction of herbal medicine. If people aren't sure about doing it the traditional way, then just making a tea with a combination of herbs, it's easily transportable. They can make a nice thermos of it, take it to work, they can drink it regularly. And then they go, oh, I actually do feel cooler, or my bloating has reduced. And then they start to inquire about different ways of having the herbs.
Yeah, and that's how herbal medicine has grown or evolved over the years of not just Chinese herbal medicine but Western herbal medicine. It's an observational system. So practitioners and their teachers would have eaten a root and then gone, oh, what does that do?
Absolutely.
And be very, very observational about their body and notice what they do. Now, we're not suggesting you just go around and eat random roots and see what happens, because we have the knowledge now. We don't need to necessarily do that. But that is something I think that's missing from our diet a lot, is that mindfulness of eating and being aware of flavours. And so that's something people can get from herbal teas, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at the properties of Chinese herbs, we look at it, the flavour of the herb, so whether it's sweet or acrid. We look at the temperature of the herb, and so whether it's warming or cooling. And we also look at what are the meridians that the herb impacts. People who know something about acupuncture would have heard of some of the meridians, such as the lung channel or the stomach channel. And so we view treating those meridians with herbs in the same way that we do with acupuncture.
Yeah, I guess that's going a little bit more beyond the average person. It's knowledge to use herbs in those channels, but that's something your practitioner might be able to advise you on as well. Like, what would be the best herbal teas for me to have, and what things to avoid or stuff like that that they could have. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. So, Adam, what was your first experience with Chinese medicine then? How did you get into it? How did you come across? How did you start studying it?
Well, my first experience was when I was travelling through China, probably about 15 years ago now. And as happens with travellers, you get a little bit sick or you get a bit of a tummy bug. And
especially in China.
Especially in China. And we're in a small village called Jiang, which is in southwestern China. And I don't speak Mandarin, and so I was a little bit lost about how to try and get over this tummy bug, and it was advised that I go and see this local practitioner who also couldn't speak English. And so it was this great interaction between his son, myself, and the doctor. And the son was translating about my symptoms, and I got packed up with this little bag of twigs and leaves and all the traditional herbs and the instructions of how to cook it up back in my little room that we were in. And lo and behold, within a day, I felt so much better. And I thought, this is amazing. You know, how is, drinking this dirt actually doing any good for me?
Wow.
So that was my first experience.
Were you scared?
I was petrified. I didn't know what it was going to do to me. But it was a leap of faith.
What year was it when you were there?
Oh, that had to have been about 2005.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. And China's changes so much. Like, I've been there quite a few times. I think I was in there in 2005. And I first went there to study 2001, sorry. And, I remember being very worried if I did. I mean, even though you were studying in a hospital, if you got seriously ill, just because of that translation. So good on you for going for, because I met some foreigners there that they did get sick, and I was like, you should use Chinese, and they're like, what, Chinese medicine? I don't, they just had no trust in it, and they didn't, and the language barrier, and then they're thinking, is this going to be dirty? Like, what is this? Is it hygienic and all that stuff? And wow,
absolutely, and it's definitely a
leap
of faith. It just jumped right in there.
Yep.
But something was drawing me towards it.
Great.
I've always had a fascination with Chinese culture, and from there it the interest grew.
Yeah.
And I've always been in the health and wellness industry, several variations of personal training and then massage therapy, and then hit 40 and you have that good old midlife crisis and it's like, what am I doing? So I decided I needed to go and do something more so that I could actually be a healer and bring more comfort and offer more to the patients. And so Chinese medicine it was.
Yeah, great.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. I bet that connection between doing massage and remedial therapies, body work and stuff has influenced you wanting to make those balms and the external liniments and stuff that you make, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Always having been quite a tactile practitioner, I always feel the tension in my patients' muscles. I try and work out where the issue is. You can tell so much just by feeling where the issue is. But the desire to make the balms actually stemmed from when my daughter was a baby, as lots of babies do. She had infant eczema and some cradle cap, and I really wanted to use something natural to try and give her the relief. And so many of the products that you buy at the store, they are marketed as natural, but they're still made with petroleum jelly. They've got chemicals in them, and I thought, I'm a herbalist, I need to be able to do this. And so through many burnt kitchen pots later and trial and error, I actually came up with some formulas based with black sesame oil, which we use both topically in Chinese medicine for skin repair, but historically black sesame seeds are also used internally. And then I've started infusing herbs into those oils and then blending them with things like the coconut oil, organic cocoa butter, and some essential oils after researching which ones were the best ones, and came up with I think were some good solutions.
Yeah, awesome. Can we have a look at some of your balms that you make?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is one here that I use for my sports patients or people with general tight muscles after workouts. So this is essentially my version of Tiger Balm. A lot of people don't realise that those store-bought products are still made with petroleum jelly, which is not good to use on the skin.
What is petroleum jelly?
So petroleum jelly is a crude-based oil.
You're in Australia, Vaso.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a bogan.
Look, it's a crude oil derivative, and even though you can get what they call hospital grade, which just means it's cleaner, it's still not good to put onto the skin long term because it essentially blocks the skin, and it's not that environmental, right? So
it's bad for the environment, it's not good for you.
That's
Try to
right.
avoid things with Vaseline.
That's right. I have people say, I put Vaseline on my lips all the time to moisturise them, but my lips are always dry. And it's like, well, it's because it's actually stopping your skin from breathing. Yeah,
okay.
So
it's trapping whatever's in there, and if it's already dry, it's nothing to trap in.
Exactly. So so I started using this one. So this is a balm that I've infused with a herb called red sage root.
That's really good.
And red sage is called Chen in Chinese medicine. And even though we use it internally for things like period pain or moving bruising, it can be used topically externally. So if you've got sore tight muscles, it's great to apply, even if it's just infused in an oil. You can use it for massage. But Can I
try a little bit of this?
Absolutely. So I've blended this with some essential oils that are great for reducing that post-exercise weariness and tightness. So there's wintergreen, peppermint.
This smells really good.
There's a little bit of clove in there.
When you use these things all the time, sometimes you get sick of I get sick of the same smell. That good old wintergreen and like menthol. But this has, because you've got your unique ingredients, it does have a different smell, and it's not too overpowering, like it's not too much. Yeah, that's good.
And I find with this particular one, the cooling nature of it really gives some relief to that post-exercise tightness that you have.
So when would people use this?
So this one, they could certainly use it if they've got some post-exercise soreness after the gym. People with sore feet, I put this on a lot.
Okay, and whereabouts? On the soles of the feet?
Just on the soles of the feet. So if someone has a bit of plantar fasciitis, which you can massage into the calf muscles, But because of the beeswax, I use a great beeswax that's unfiltered, so it's not got any of that bleach residue in it. But the beeswax also helps create that nice moisturising layer. I don't know about in Perth, but in Sydney we get the thong heels, which means you get the cracked heels around the back. And
I don't know what they call it in Perth, but we get it. I've seen it around.
And so this is great for massaging into that as well.
Yep. Yeah, okay. Yep. Just so people know what a thong is.
It's a flip-flop.
There's some Americans watching this.
What's
a thong?
So
thong heel.
So flip-flops, it's the rubber shoes that have absolutely no support and actually are really bad to wear. But
don't put it down there.
No, absolutely not.
It's going to burn.
Yeah.
It feels really good, and you can actually feel that that layer protection thing, like, because I've made products before with beeswax, and it has that nice. It does sort of seal things in, but it's not like too. It's not going to block the skin. It doesn't feel like that.
So unlike the Vaseline, it's not going to block the skin.
This is actually really good. It doesn't have I was going to say it doesn't have a horrible residue, but I've experimented with making my own balms, and I've not made any good ones. There's none that I've been able to bring to market because they're all like yellow, or there's some kind of red residue there, like Huang Lian residue or something. So this is lovely.
Don't put it on before you're wearing a white t-shirt, that type of thing.
Yeah. But this is good.
Yes.
So this is one that you've obviously used a lot in your practice with all the musculoskeletal therapy.
Absolutely.
That you see,
yes.
Right?
And then along the same lines, I thought, well, it'd be really good to have a lip balm that wasn't petroleum based.
Okay, that's good.
And so I started infusing some herbs. Calendula is a great one. So that's marigold flowers. It's really cooling. It's got the antiseptic and the anti-inflammatory properties. And then I've put that also with the beautiful beeswax, and there's organic cocoa butter and organic coconut oil in it as well.
So that'd be good if people do have those chapped, dry lips, and they feel sore. Like it happens a lot to kids, I think, because they lick their lips all the time.
Absolutely.
And then their lips are actually painful, almost burning, right? Some little kids can be like that, and they've got these horrible red lips all the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you're my daughter who requested I make a chocolate flavoured one of all things.
Oh, you're such a good dad.
They end up eating the lip balm rather than just applying it. But I find that the herbs in it actually are really soothing on the lips. So I use chrysanthemum or calendula, and then I also use one with peppermint. But peppermint, I find people either love the tingle from the peppermint or they're not so keen on it.
Yeah. I think if you've already got the burning dry lips, don't use peppermint.
Don't use the peppermint.
Yeah, but if you do, I've tried that before. But it does. You're exactly right. People either love or hate it, and sometimes it's nice to have that refreshing.
Yeah,
I guess if you're gonna, we're recording this on Valentine's Day actually. If you're gonna go out and have a good night out,
tonight or something,
you're gonna smell minty fresh. Put the peppermint one on.
Or you could go for the chocolate flavour. If it's for dessert, who knows?
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before and after.
So there are a couple of different ways. Yes, that's the chocolate one.
Yeah.
And I find that because it's not petroleum based, it's really smooth on the lips and it doesn't wear off too quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. So those balms and the lip balms and the normal balm, the body balms, musculoskeletal balms and things like that you make sounds really amazing. And that's something like when I first studied Chinese medicine, I was super into that, and I really wanted to make stuff, and I was really into the idea of I guess that old apothecary chemist that's what chemists used to be. You go to a chemist and they would make something up for you, and that's what compounding chemists do now, but they don't really make they don't, like in the old days, chemists used to make soaps and lathers and all that sort of stuff, and and we didn't have preservatives and companies and chemicals and all that sort of stuff back in those times. And I guess in our society we've kind of lost the ability to make that stuff because we don't know. I mean, the good thing with the internet is now people can watch videos and learn how to make balms and like soaps or bits and pieces themselves. So if people are that way inclined and they're like, I want to make my own lip balm, or I want to make this, or I want to make that, or some teas, what are some herbs people could work with that they'd be pretty safe or less not safe to use? Because just so that you understand, like we can't like nothing is 100% safe. Like you can die from drinking water. You can die from drinking too much water. So don't ever just think, oh, this is safe, so I can just have a max, because sometimes it's got to do with the quantity, like you're just having way too much of it, right?
Absolutely.
So always use common sense, and if you don't have any common sense, maybe don't use it. But also maybe consult your practitioner or an expert in that area to know exactly what you should or shouldn't use, because especially if you've got something like where you're pregnant or so
absolutely.
Yeah, what would your take be on that?
And I think that's a really good point, that herbal medicine needs to be treated just like any other type of medicine. You've got to consider the dosage, you've got to consider the timing, you've got to look at contraindications, whether you're taking other pharmaceutical medications, other herbal formulas. I often have people come to me who are multi-practitioners, so they'll see a naturopath, they'll be seeing their GP, so they're on some medications, and then they come to me for herbal medicine. And once I take a full history, I'm like, well, you're already taking what I would consider your maximum dose of this herb, so I'm not going to give you more of that. Otherwise, you can get side effects. And understanding your full medical history as well. You mentioned pregnancy. So using things like calendula tea is a no-no when you're pregnancy, because we consider calendula as something that invigorates the blood. And so we don't want to induce any form of bleeding when you're pregnant. But some herbs that are relatively safe, used in the proper way. So we've spoken about chrysanthemum. That's a great one. You can just make a tea out of that. A really common herb that we use for digestive issues is dried mandarin peel. In Chinese, that's called Chen pea. And I just happen to have some here. So
fancy that.
Through the magic of television.
Wow.
And so this is so this is really safe to use in a tea. You can put so if you so this one has been cut nice and finely. If you were to go to your Chinese herbal store, you'd probably buy it in nice big pieces. But it's fine to put in a combination of different herbs in your tea. And so for things like indigestion, bloating...
people can make their own Chen pea, right?
Absolutely.
How do they do that?
And I've done that. If you've got a dehydrator, that's probably one way to do it. Or even you can just put it in a tray in your oven at the lowest possible temperature, like 40 or 50 degrees Celsius. Just put your mandarin peel on a tray and leave it there overnight until it's nice and dry. You want to have it really dry. If there's any moisture left in it, then during storage, of course, moisture is a breeding ground for other pathogens. So,
where I am in Perth, we can make it outside because it's 40 degrees and it's so dry. not over this side of the country.
Not on the eastern coast, no, particularly with the rain we've had at the moment. But drying your herbs is something that is great to do, and then they're available to use whenever you like. But
you can also buy these things really, really easily. Like we said with the chrysanthemum, all these things you can just probably get from mostly your Chinatown stores. And I'll put the names on the screen, but I'll also put the link in the description below in the description below this video, I'll put like a list of these herbs, so you can look up the Chinese name or the characters of them if you go to Chinatown to look for them.
Yes.
Okay.
Another really common one that people have probably heard of is ginger root. Now, people have often heard of ginger being great for nausea. We use it a lot in pregnancy for morning sickness. It's very safe to use. There's been a lot of research done behind using dried ginger root. Fresh ginger is really good as well. The main difference between the dried ginger and the fresh ginger is dried ginger is much stronger. So again, understanding the dosage, you would use a tiny little bit of the dried ginger in a pot of tea, like I'm talking a quarter of a teaspoon. So if you have a look at the dried ginger,
I don't want to smell it too hard because I know how strong it smells. My little nephew he's 2 years old, and he comes in my office and he puts his head right in the dried ginger and he just loves it. He goes, ginger.
This actually reminds me of my grandma. When I was little, in those days, they always had the crystalline ginger, which was good for travel sickness.
So you probably need about that much, right?
Probably that much,
to start with, I would put that much.
Yes.
As a tea, right? And then you can go from there, because you can always put more.
Add more. What do they say? It's easier to add more. You can't take it out once it's in there.
So what would they do? Exactly what would they do? They put the ginger in, they put the hot water.
So put the ginger in with your hot water. I don't recommend using boiling water on any herbs.
Okay.
And that's because at 100 degrees you can change the chemical ingredients of the herb itself. Exactly. So you're essentially cooking it. What you want to do is to steep it. So if you don't have one of those fancy new kettles that can boil to 80 or 90 degrees, just boil your kettle. Once it's boiled, then leave it for 3 minutes so that it reduces a little bit, and then put that onto your herbs.
Okay. Yep.
And I recommend starting off with about between 3 and 5 minutes for your steeping time.
Yep.
Taste it, and if it's not too strong, you can always do a second brew afterwards. That's a common practice as well. Just repouring more warm water over the top and getting more of the herb ingredients out of it.
Especially something like ginger tea for nausea. Let's say you've got like heaps of nausea, you could make a stronger tea, or let's say the tea we just said, make that the start. The nausea goes down, but then you just want to sip on it through the day. You just make it like keep putting the hot water over those same herbs, or add a tiny little bit more each time.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can start having fun with combining your herbs. And that's really where herbal medicine becomes fun and interesting. Once you start to learn the actions of some of them, you can join them all together to make your own formula.
What can people put with ginger then?
So if you're looking at indigestion and bloating, then a really common one is hawthorn berry. It's used a lot in Chinese medicine for digestive issues. Now this is
and it tastes so yummy as well.
It does. It's got a really nice tangy sour flavour. The berry itself is dried and then put into these small rounds.
You can see it there. Yeah.
And what I love doing with this one is actually putting it into my teacup and then letting it soak for a few minutes. You'll get that delicious tangy flavour in the tea, and then at the end you can eat the fruit.
Oh yeah,
it's great. Yeah. Some herbal suppliers will actually chop it up for you. So if you wanted more of it, you can get it ground up into the nice small pieces. But we use this a lot for what we call moving the qi in the digestive system. So bloating, indigestion, those types of issues.
In a lot of herbal textbooks, like the diet therapy textbooks, they often use shanja as a herbal wine for menstrual stuff, or shanja for, like, it's got two main things. It moves qi, but it's like, or moving blood, but it also it's like stops food stagnation.
Absolutely.
So food stagnation is like after you've gone to an all-you-can-eat buffet and you feel like, oh, I'm bloated, I can't eat anymore. Now, some people feel like that even though they didn't go to an all-you-can-eat buffet. They just eat a tiny little bit and they feel like so bloated.
Yes.
And so shanja is something you can, or hawthorn, you can just have through the day, right? Just to stop that bloated feeling. And
absolutely. But again, understanding some of the contraindications, so because it's quite acidic, if you've got any type of ulcer, like a stomach ulcer, then you need to avoid it because it can irritate that.
And pregnancy?
Pregnancy, I would avoid it in pregnancy as well, because it is the moving aspect, so we just need to be careful of that.
If you're not sure with pregnancy, like there's some things where as a tea off the shelf, you're probably going to be told, no, don't use it. But then when you go to a practitioner, if they combine herbs together, it alters what they do. Like it alters the overall result actions, is different. And so if you go and see a registered herbalist or a herbalist, then they will know, like, so there's some things where you read on the internet, oh, you can't use this for pregnancy, but then a herbalist might actually prescribe that to you, but it's within the context of a formula. It's a lot different to one herb at a time. But when you're just doing it at home by yourself, it's better to err on the side of caution and just stick with the stuff that is safe, or consult your herbalist for your own individual advice. So this doesn't trump your own herbalist kind of individual advice.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
Some of that has to do with the way that the herbs are prepared as well.
Preparing is important.
Yeah, so whether the herb has been dried just in the sun or in an oven, or sometimes we use fried herbs, and there might actually be an addition to the fried herb like honey. Licorice is a really good example. Sometimes we use just the dried licorice root, but sometimes we'll use it fried and it's with the honey, and that changes the actions of the herb.
It does, definitely. It makes a completely different function of what it's doing. Cool, awesome. This is so exciting. People can take some of this stuff in home and use it themselves and start getting into herbs. And I think what's really important is, or not so much important, but really nice about it is that it does get you in touch with, what you said, it gives you an introduction to medicine of a different nature, of herbal medicine. And it starts getting you into a bit more about mindfulness. Well, what is this? Do I like this taste? What is this flavour? Something I find with our foods now is that we just have 2 flavours, salty and sweet. Like people don't notice. Like you said, Shanjar with the sour flavour.
Yes.
It's not like a sour warhead. I can remember those old the sour bomb lollies when I was younger.
Yes.
Crazy. It's not crazy mental sour. It's not as sour as a lemon, but it has that nice sour flavour.
Yes.
It also has like a sweet flavour too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, Adam, as a herbalist, I'm sure you come across this question because I do as well. Do patients come to you worried about, what about endangered species? What about rhinoceros horn? Are you using these things in your practice?
It's a fairly common question, particularly for those people who haven't been exposed to traditional herbal medicine. And unfortunately, there is press about the people who do the wrong thing. And
it's a really valid question. Like, it's good for you to ask. We like you asking those questions, even though
absolutely.
it might not seem like some people like you asking it. It's good that you ask it.
And the important thing is to understand that we can put your mind at peace. There's a group called CITES which looks after endangered species, both flora and fauna. And dozens of countries around the world actually adhere to these guidelines. And so that is making sure that we don't use or don't encourage any type of animal or plant product that is classified as endangered. Now, I also then get the question of, well, what about other animal products? Do you use any at all? And it's an important question for some of my patients that are vegan or vegetarian, and the answer is at times, yes, I might use some animal products. And they might include things like oyster shells, which we use in some formulas because oyster shell is very cooling and very salty. Or I might use dried cicada shells, which is called Chen in Chinese medicine, and we use that to try and reduce tremors or any type of shaking, because in Chinese medicine we say it helps eliminate wind, which is not the wind in the tummy type wind, but we say
the other kind of wind.
The other kind of wind, but we say wind actually creates this shaking, and so I might put some of that in there. So if you do have a question about animal products, always good to mention your questions to your herbalist, particularly if you are vegetarian or vegan. There's always alternatives. We can always find something else to suit your needs.
Okay, so if a patient comes into you and says, what's in my herbs and I'm a vegan, you can adjust the formula around that as best you can.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what you mentioned CITES, like there's some practitioners that, like, how are they regulating it? Like, are there some practitioners that just ignore it and they just use it? Or what, like in Australia, how likely is it that these things are going to be available?
It's very unlikely that these ingredients, some of the more common ones that people might be concerned about are tiger ingredients or rhinoceros horn, and
bear
of course
bile.
Bear bile. And of course it's abhorrent to even think of using that type of ingredient. But the Therapeutic Goods Association in Australia covers the safe use and the appropriate use of herbal medicines.
How are they actually making sure, like, that these things aren't being used?
Well, bodies such as the Therapeutic Goods Association in Australia covers the safe use and the appropriate use of ingredients, whether it's pharmaceutical or herbal medicine in Australia. So if you're buying something over the counter, or if your practitioner gives you a pre-prepared product, such as, you might get a little pill form like this, then it should have a TGA number on it, and that might look like a number that starts with AUSTL and then a number after it. That means it's been listed with the TGA. Sometimes you might be given a formula that's been made up of powders that is custom made by your herbalist. And so if you are unsure, then you should speak to your herbalist and make sure that they're following CITES protocol and that all of the ingredients are safe and appropriate to use.
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of suppliers in Australia that are doing a good thing to kind of regulate that, and like it's a self-regulated industry in a lot of ways, and that's why people do have valid concerns.
Yes.
Like there are some companies that are more willing to, I guess, adulterate products than others, and so it's really important that you find companies like the herbalists that you're going to have are using reputable suppliers. But the most alarming studies that have been done that showed adulterated products. Like there was one recently where they found like different species of things that weren't listed on the products and stuff in these kinds of over-the-counter. They were all over-the-counter herbal medicines, and actually lots of them in the study weren't listed with the TGA. They were just things that people had purchased from overseas and started selling them in their little Chinatown store, and then so that's one thing where it doesn't mean if you go to a herbalist, a registered herbalist, like it's guaranteed. That's why we're having these conversations, so you can be informed when you go to a herbalist, and it might be different. Like we're talking about in Australia here, so in your country it might be different as well. That when you go to a herbalist, like it's on their conscience, and it's their ethical sort of standards that you want to investigate or ask them about and see what's in it. And just like you said, if the patients had the vegan situation, you could adjust the formula for them or have that conversation and talk about why they might need a certain herb. And that's
important, that as a patient you should feel empowered to ask these questions. Don't be afraid to find out and to do your research and to make sure that ethically and responsibly that you're being given the right solution.
And that's why I'm doing this channel, because I want people to know that they can ask those things. And some people don't feel empowered to ask. They feel like, they're rushed out the door, or they also, maybe you just don't have time to have I wouldn't have this long conversation with every one of my patients either, so it's good that we put this knowledge out there. But the thing you have to worry about is if you think, I'm going to go down, like we talked about going down to Chinatown to buy some chrysanthemum, and then you're like, while you're there, I'm going to get this menstrual blend or this other thing. And in Australia, we have this regulation. In America, they have the FDA, is it FDA, Federal Drugs
Food and Drug Association,
and so that's the TGA and the FDA are very similar things. I think in the UK they probably have something similar to that. Put it in the comments below if you know what it is. And so it's important that you're informed, and that to me that's the biggest benefit of going and seeing an expert, someone that knows what they're doing. They've spent the time training to know you're getting that benefit, rather than you just popping down to Chinatown and picking something up off the shelf that you're not sure what it really does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good. Awesome. It's been so great to have you on the podcast today, Adam, and talking about your knowledge and sharing stuff. And I think if people are interested in knowing more about what you do, we'll put the link to Adam's clinic below. Where can they find you? If people
so you can easily just head to my website, www.annandalechinesemedicine.com. I've got information there about the products that I make, but also feel free just to get in contact if you've got any questions at all about herbal medicine or Chinese medicine in general. I love sharing the knowledge.
So you practice acupuncture and herbs?
I do. So I'm an acupuncturist and a herbalist, and I often use the two in conjunction for all of my patients. And
this is one of Adam's lovely teas. So all these products that we've been talking about and these teas. So if you're like, Maria, I'd love to go down to Chinatown, but I don't have time for that. That's why we make these kind of products, so that it makes it easier for you. So you can jump onto his website and have a look at his products and his herbal teas. So he's done the blending for you, so you don't have to worry about that. And so you can still experiment and get out there and do that. So you can buy those stuff online. He also stocks them in different shops around Australia, so you'll be able to check that out on his website. So thanks so much for watching, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you click that subscribe button. If you're listening on the audio, I would love it if you're loving this stuff and you think, this is really great, I'm really enjoying this, go on to Apple and leave us a review, because that would really help. We're really new on the podcast audio platform, so if you leave a review, you'll make my day. You'll make me really happy. And so thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. Did you know we're also on TikTok? And you can find shorter videos on Facebook and Instagram that you might like to share with your friends and family. You can also find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all places where you listen to audio podcasts. I look forward to seeing you again on the next video soon.